proposals. A lot of times students don't quite understand why we write a proposal and what it's supposed to do, and this video will really focus and highlight the persuasion element of proposals. So what should proposals do? They should convince a reader that something is a problem. They should also convince the reader that the problem needs to be addressed. So since something is a problem doesn't necessarily mean that it's worth doing anything about, it could just be a mild annoyance. So your job is to convince them that not only is it a problem, but it's something worth giving time, money, resources to commit to solving the problem. So in order to do that, you have to use a couple of different techniques in order to persuade the reader that this is a problem that they need to pay attention to and that you are offering some proposed solutions. So how do you persuade then? So the first step would be to analyze who your audience is. Remember, for the goals of this project, your audience is not me. I am not your target reader. You want to consider who would be the ideal recipient for your proposal. And this reader would be somebody who could actually give you the time, money, energy, or resources to commit to solving the problem, and also could be the one responsible for implementing the recommendations that you will craft in your recommendation report. So for instance, if that audience were upper administration, they're going to be persuaded by different kinds of things than, say, your fellow students. So you want to think very carefully about who your audience is and what are the kinds of things that they'll find particularly persuasive and what kinds of strategies you want to use to convince them to move forward with your project. One of the things that would be useful regardless of who your audience is will be to back up your ideas with source information. And of course, the sources will again depend on who your audience is and on your project, but you want to think about the kinds of information that a reader will find useful and that will be persuasive to them to demonstrate that the problem is a problem and that you should address it in various ways. So this might be taking a look at what's been done currently upon the problem. It might be taking a look at current programs or methods being used to solve the problem in other spaces, or things that we might evaluate to adapt for solving the problem in this particular context here at Boise State. The other element of using source information is to actually create a rationale. You don't want to make any assumptions about the knowledge of your reader. So a lot of times students think, hey, this is clearly a problem. I don't need to explain why it's a problem, and I don't need to back it up with any source information. So just because you see the problem doesn't mean that your reader is going to see it in the same way. So you want to make sure you create that rationale that says, hey, this is a problem. Here's the ways that it is a problem. Here's how it's a problem in other spaces using my source information. And here's what we can think about doing about it. So that moves into your last stage of persuasion in a proposal, which is that you have a clear plan for moving forward. Now keep in mind that a proposal is meant to project future action. So that means you might have a plan now, but of course as you begin to actually collect data and do more research, that plan might change. But you do want this plan to seem well informed, to be based on the information you have in front of you, and to provide a good basis to move forward into the next phase of the project. So that's really where you want to think about proposals in general anyway, is that it's a well-informed plan, but of course it's a plan that may shift and change as you continue doing the work. So I want to take a look at one of the examples that I provided on Blackboard for this course. This is the introduction, and one of the things you can take a look at immediately is the number of source citations that you see just in this introduction. So just because it's a proposal doesn't mean that you're just pulling the information out of nowhere. You want to have a lot of robust use of sources in your proposal that you'll build on for your recommendation report. So here you can see the numbers indicate different sources. So just in this one paragraph, they've cited 3 different sources. They also don't make assumptions about the reader's knowledge. So they give a little bit of detail about Boise State University. They're looking at the bus shuttle system as being a problem. And so they're talking about sort of the explosion in growth. They don't assume the reader knows this, even though they're targeting somebody who likely knows that Boise State's been growing rapidly. So they talk about the transition of the student body, how things have changed, and then also the various modes of transportation students use. They also then state what the current shuttle system is and then go into the goals of the system. So they don't assume that the readers have a ton of information about the current state of the shuttle system on Boise State's campus, and they make sure to contextualize the problem within the larger issues of the growing university. So you can see here they're not making assumptions, they're using source information really robustly, they're detailing the problem fully and justifying it with a strong rationale for why it's a problem and why it needs addressed. And the next element is the actual project rationale, which is one of the sections you'll create for your proposal. And so this is where, while the introduction introduces some of the ideas, the project rationale goes into a little bit more detail. So again, here you see a nice use of sources. They're citing, again, 3 different sources that they didn't cite earlier. And then they also go through the different points that they want to make about why this project is something worth approaching. So they start with the idea that Boise State's growing and that transportation is becoming a larger issue, and then they go into details about that. They also talk about the fact that the computer science department moved downtown, which creates a new strain on transportation on campus. And then the second point they make is about the ways that students are relying on walking and biking and other modes of transportation. So while the first point focuses on some of the challenge specific to Boise State's campus, the second point talks about student need, the ways that students are using alternate forms of transportation to get about campus easily, and that they do need shuttle systems in order to make that work so that they're not driving. They also talk about the app, and they bring in a source to support that. And then they kind of go into the points there too. The last thing that they do is they have a clear plan. So the methods section is where you detail out parts of those plans. So you talk about the methods you'll use to collect data about your project, and this is persuasive. It tells the reader you understand the problem and you understand the kinds of things you need to do to get more information about the problem in order to offer clear recommendations. So here they detail out primary and secondary research, but really you want to focus in the method section about that primary research. So how are you going to get primary information about your topic? So are you going to survey? Are you going to observe? Are you going to collect? How are you collecting data essentially? The second part of the methods is this task breakdown. And here this tells the reader that you not only have a clearly defined plan for how you plan to gather information and to do something about the problem, but you've also broken it down into specific tasks and you have a deadline matched up for those tasks. Here you can see the readers use a table to break up those tasks. You could also use a Gantt chart. Any kind of visual representation of those tasks and the dates that you plan to complete them would be useful. And I can help you think about how to visualize this better in our conference. So key takeaways here. This is just a quick overview, but I really want you to think very heavily about the ways that a proposal is based primarily on persuasion. Your job is to persuade the reader that the problem that you want to address is indeed a problem, that it's a problem worth solving, and it's also one that you can actually do something about so that you have a clear rationale and a clear plan. So since your goal is to persuade the reader, you want to use all of your available means. So those available means include the use of sources, an understanding of what the reader expects or what they would find particularly useful, and also you having a clear plan. And then finally, the last key to a successful and persuasive proposal is revision, of course. So revise, 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 get feedback from your peers, get feedback from me, and this will help you to think about how you can continue refining the proposal to be very clear, effective, and strong overall. I hope this is helpful to continue thinking about what a proposal is and does, and moving forward, if you have questions, please reach out to me.